G'day everybody and welcome to tonight's live stream on forms. I'm Jordan Portlock, I'm the Assistant Head of Flight Operations for RAAus, and joining me tonight is Jill Bailey, the Head of Flight Operations. G'day Jill.
Howdy everybody.
Thanks for joining us on what we hope to make an exciting topic for tonight. We're quite excited about forms, but we are a little bit crazy in that fashion. So it's great to see so many people joining us so far from our flying schools around the country. So get out everybody who's put a comment on so far. So the new forms have been released today, 24th of November, and they have been released with quite substantial changes. So we thought we'd do this live stream to sort of talk our instructors and CFIs and pilot examiners through the new forms and give a bit of an understanding why we've changed them, what direction we're heading, and a bit of guidance for our instructors. We review our forms, as you would have seen in the email invite for this live stream the other day. We review our forms every November. That is going to change next year to the middle of the year, to June. But this is part of our continuous improvement plan. And like I said, we've gone in quite a different way this year, so we want to talk you through it. The main reason that we've gone the way that we've gone is to make everybody's life easier. So the instructors and CFIs that are watching tonight and will watch in the coming weeks and over the next 6 months, we'll probably have had a call from either Jill or I or one of our member staff, Letitia or Sean, asking them to tick another box or fill something in or something like that. So one of the reasons that we've done it is to make your life easier, less hassle, less boxes to tick, and make the process actually easier for submitting a form, and then also make our staff's life easier. So with that, what we're going to do is there's been, like I said, quite significant changes on some of the forms. We're going to go through some of the forms and just talk through the changes. You can find them on our forms page if you just Google RAAus forms or go to the RAAus website and then across to the forms on the top tab. You can actually find the current forms there. They were pushed live this morning about 11 o'clock. So we're going to go through some of the forms and just talk you through them. There we go. There's the link that people have put up. Thank you for Marette and Cody in the background. And whilst we're here, I'd like to say a big thanks for the team for the reviews. It's been 6 weeks of our life going through these, and a huge thank you to Marette, who's put up with Jill and I, but mostly me pestering her to change things over and over again. So if we can bring up the RPC 001 form, and you can play along at home and bring up the form or watch here, that'd be great. I will say, if you've got any questions, put them in the comments section, and we're happy to talk through them as we go. So the first thing that you'll see, well, the top of the form is pretty similar. We've actually changed the RPC forms, RPC 001 and RPC 002 to different names, and that's to try and help the membership understand the use and also to segment them slightly. So this RPC 001 is the ab initio pilot certificate initial issue. And you'll see the note at the top of the form there, which says this form is to be used for ab initio students who are solely trained under the RAAus system. So if you get a student come to you learning to fly from the start, and they go through the pilot certificate, and then on from that, you use this form. If you get a member who comes, or a person who comes from another organisation, and my example I put down on my script for tonight is if they've got, let's say they did half an hour TIFF in a trike or a half an hour flight in a glider 15 years ago, and they want to count that, you then use RPC 002 because they're not solely trained under the RAAus system. Now, it could be that, it could be you got a PPL in 1983, it could be a current commercial pilot, or it could be a retired airline captain with 20,000 hours. So anything other than an ab initio student through RAAus will use the RPC 002 form, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And that note at the top there is just to remind you about that. If we scroll down a little bit, we'll see the applicant's declaration and signature and the changes there. And I might just throw to Jill to sort of talk through the ethos behind getting rid of some of the tick boxes and what that actually means. So handing over, Jill.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, taking over. The ethos behind this was purely because these things are things that the person is declaring to be true. So as we talk about the first one, certify able to understand, carry out instructions in the English language, and my health standard is equivalent to a private motor vehicle licence in Australia. Previously was one tick box. The next one was if you are over 75 or you have any of the following conditions, you need to do something different. The next one, each of those were individual tick boxes and they were being missed. So we sought some advice, and by putting them into one box with one signature and date, it means that the person is deemed to have read all of that, confirmed it's correct, and by signing is confirming that those things are certified or confirmed. So it makes it much simpler. It's just a simple signature box and date. But obviously, as it is with any documentation, when you sign it, we don't want people to just go, yeah, blah, 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 sign and date. So it's worthwhile sitting down with the applicant and saying, okay, this is saying that you can understand English, and this is saying that you meet the driver licence standard, and this is saying that you haven't had an authorisation varied, suspended or cancelled. So it is important to read through those with the applicant before signing, but then there's no tick boxes. Yay.
And like we said, hopefully it'll make your lives a lot easier and then the staff's life as well. Just to clarify, the top one says, I certify I'm able to understand and I have the health standard. The next one says, I understand that if I am. So that's just a reminder to members. So if you get someone who's a bit apprehensive or hesitant to sign that, it's not saying that they have one of those conditions or are over 75. It's just saying that I understand that if I am, these are the things that I have to do. I have to provide a statement to RAAus. So hopefully, like I said, that'll make our life a lot easier and give you a bit of an understanding as to why we've gone down that path and remove the tick boxes. So if we scroll down a little bit further, the payment box is the same. We go on to the second page. The second page has also got quite a few changes. So once again, we've removed the tick boxes where we can. At the top, on the second page, it says applicant name and applicant member number. Now, there are some examiners around the country who are putting their own names in there, which is completely understandable because at the top it says examiner to complete, but we actually want the applicant name. So the student who's coming through, or the member name and number on there. And that's just on that page in case we print it out or it's sent in or faxed in or something and we lose them at some point, we can actually put them together because it's got all the details on there. Then we've changed, like I said, the format around a little bit, and we've tried to standardize these forms quite a bit as well. So you will issue the group A, B, or D. You'll tick one of them for whatever you're recommending the issue of. And then we've also brought all the endorsements together. So the two endorsements that people will normally do will be human factors and radio, and then they'll have been trained on a nose wheel or tail wheel aircraft. Now, these used to be down the bottom in the certification box, but there was no need for them to be there because it still is the issue of an endorsement. So they're all in that same box. So you tick the relevant ones if you did your training in a Jabiru 230, human factors, radio, and nose wheel. And then if you did any other additional endorsements, you tick that box and then write down the bottom what that endorsement would be. If we scroll down a little bit further, you can probably go all the way to the bottom if it fits. Oh, that's okay. Now scroll up a little bit. Sorry, get the flight test. Perfect. So the flight test box has always been there, or from the previous iteration anyway. And we've got the aircraft that the flight test was conducted in, the aircraft registration. Those of you who are CFIs or have pilot examiners or and do instructor issues or renewals will note that that form has a flight duration box on it. We're actually once again standardising that across our forms, the RPC 001, 002, the BFR forms and the instructor forms as well. So we just ask that you put the flight duration on there, and that just allows us to gather some statistical data as we go through the forms. Then you've got your aeronautical experience, total command RAAus, dual and RAAus aircraft only. Like we said, this form is only for RPC initial issue for people trained solely under the RAAus. So all the hours that will go in here will be the hours that they've done training in an RAAus aircraft. And then if we scroll down, we've also changed the examiner declaration and signature. So once again, removed a whole lot of boxes. So you'll remember some of the boxes from the previous forms. Up the top where I certify the applicant has demonstrated the required competency. I certify the applicant has completed the examination requirements, met the flight time and passed the flight test. So these all used to be boxes, tick boxes. And we're human, we forget to do them. So now it makes our lives a lot easier. So in that box, you put your name, sign, just the same as it used to be before. As Jill mentioned before, though, it is incumbent on our CFIs and examiner cohort in RAAus to actually make sure that you read through these and that you are actually doing these things. So rather than before where there might be a tick box, you might go, oh, I'll just go check that before I tick it. You actually want to read through these and make sure that the person has actually met all the requirements of the syllabus. They have actually completed all the exams and met the flight time and passed a flight test. So just make sure that you go through all of these. And once again, the bottom one, I confirm I've completed a logbook entry, no longer a tick box anymore. So once again, incumbent on the examiner, CFI or pilot examiner or deputy CFI in the RPC case, that they actually still write in the logbook for the member. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea as to the RPC form, RPC 001. There's not a huge amount of changes that are different to this on RPC 002, so we're not going to go through that. But just once again, RPC 001 used for anybody who is solely RAAus trained, and anything else if they want to recognise any other qualifications, and that includes transferring from a Group B to Group A or a Group A to Group D. You use the converting pilot form. So now we'll move on, if we can bring up the BFR 001 form, and we'll talk through the changes in the BFR form. I might hand over to Jill to talk through this.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. So there's a whole lot of things that are the same for these forms, and as Jordan's pointed out, we're trying to get consistency across the forms. So part of the process was to look at the forms as a whole and see how they're laid out and how we can lay them out to make it easier for you filling them in, for the applicant filling them in, and for the staff when they're processing. So we've looked at these forms with that in mind. So again, top section hasn't really changed all that much. They are all PDF fillables, which we try to do to make life easier. So thanks, Maret. The applicant declaration again, the applicant again needs to be very clear that they've read this and that they're certifying and agreeing to all of the things in this box. So we haven't got separate tick boxes for them. Again, it says that this flight review is being carried out in accordance with the requirements of the Flight Operations Manual. That's actually a prompt for the applicant to obviously confirm that, but obviously for the examiner to make sure they have conducted it in accordance with the Ops Manual. The health standard declaration and the notification that if they are 75 or over, or they have one of those following conditions that are nominated there, that they have to complete an action, which is providing a statement to RAAus that that their health standard is equivalent. If we scroll down a tad further, yep, perfect. We've now got, again, the ethos of let's contain all of this information in the one area. So it now says BFR conducted in Group A, B, or D. So you tick one or the other, you know, the one that you've done the aircraft that you've done the BFR in. The aircraft type, aircraft registration, flight duration. And then the second box there, single seat observed or two-seat dual, obviously allows for exactly that, a single seat observed BFR, or if you've sat in the aircraft with the candidate. The note is possibly a bit of a reminder that if a single seat observed BFR is conducted, the pilot's got to hold a current BFR. If their BFR has lapsed, they cannot be PIC of an RAAus aircraft. They'll actually be in breach of the Act, which is pretty serious. We obviously don't go out there and run around prosecuting people. However, it is an act of strict liability. So if the pilot is not compliant, the pilot is responsible for flying the aircraft with a current BFR. Again, the examiner declaration talking about the examiner confirming that the review was conducted in accordance with the flight ops manual and the syllabus of flight training. They're satisfied that the PIC is competent in all required elements that were part of that flight test. Obviously, it's not necessarily possible to do all things in a BFR. So therefore, it's just as for the flight that was conducted, the things that were assessed have been confirmed as competent. And we've given a reference in there for RAP 5. And so RAP 5 has been around for a little while now, what to expect from your BFR. One of the changes that we've made to this form is the checklist that was part of this form has now, or will be, very shortly, that's something else Marette and the team have to work on, been incorporated into that RAP. So we'll be doing another live stream very shortly on RAPs. There's a whole lot of guidance information in the RAPs that are really useful for a variety of topics, and I'm sure there's plenty of the people watching today that have already gone and read the RAPs. So the checklist that was part of this BFR form has now moved into RAP 5. The examiner is confirming that the correct endorsements are held. It's another item that pops up on occasions. We have pilots that call us up and say, hey, I didn't get my blah endorsement. Well, that's because the examiner didn't necessarily advise us that that was the case. So it's very helpful if the examiner at the time can say, do you have all the endorsements you require, and confirm that they do. HF is a perfect example. Way back in the day, some people weren't given radio endorsements as part of their RPC, but they've been operating radio all that time. So that's an opportunity for the examiner to confirm that. And again, to confirm that the logbook entry and the hours have been verified, and we give some suggested wording there for the BFR as well. And all of that is contained in one box with the examiner signature, date, member number, name of school, etc. So again, the ethos of trying to make it as easy as possible while still containing all the elements that we require to be confirmed. Handing back over, Jordan.
Thanks, Jill. I'll just go back on to RAP 5 as well. Also, another reason for having it in there is we know a lot of instructors reference it and will send it out to the candidate prior to the BFR of what to expect, hence the name. Having it in there adds more power to the instructor to say, I have to conduct the flight review or BFR in accordance with this because it's on the form. So like we said, moving away from the days of a lap around the block as a flight review or BFR, and actually going through that section there. So like I said, a little bit more power for the examiners there. Once again, thank you for everyone for joining us. We've got lots of CFIs saying good day, and like I said, if you've got any questions or any comments or anything, feel free to let us know. Let us know in the next couple of days as well. We have been working on these forms for quite a while, working over and over, and we get quite stuck looking at them. So if there are things that we've missed or suggestions that you could make, feel free to send us an email to Jill or I or to ops@raals.com.au, and we'll certainly follow them up in the next review. So yeah, we encourage the feedback there. BFR 002, as Jill said, there was BFR 002 is the combined SAFA and RAAus BFR form for powered parachute and weight shift microlight flight reviews or BFRs. There was a checklist on there. That checklist has actually been removed, as Jill said, the same as BFR 001 and also BFR 003, the COVID observed one, used to have one. All of those will be moved into RAP 5, as Jill said. So really important just to remember that the guidance material is in there. What we try to get away from is having to have the CFI or senior instructor ticking 400 boxes at the end of a flight review. So the information's still there. We suggest you go look at it, but it just won't be as much of a hindrance at this point. So we might go on and talk about the instructor forms, probably the forms with the greatest amount of change. And Craig Dave's just come up.
Go on to that, Jordan, there's a question from Craig, and And g'day, Craig, out at Narandra. Thanks for joining. The forms are fillable, Adobe files. Are they also electronically signable through Fill and Sign? Absolutely. We want to make it as simple as possible for you to do this on your tablet or your whatever electronic device you have. So I don't want you to have to print it out, sign it, scan it, send it back. So by all means, if you have an electronic signature that you can use for these forms, go ahead. Life is good. Let's make it easy. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jordan.
exactly. No, that's great. Thanks, Jill. So the instructor issue or upgrade, INS 001, everybody would have probably seen one of these at a point. The top bit remains exactly the same. The issue of instructor senior, the tick box there is also the same as it has always been or has been recently. Once again, the declaration slightly changed. No more tick boxes. Make it a lot easier for the applicant to go through. The wording has slightly changed in the medical section. So it used to reference Class 2 or RAAus medical form Med 003. We've actually changed that to I certify that I meet the medical requirements for a rating or approval holder as specified in the RAAus Ops Manual, section 2.16, which is where that is housed. If at some point down the line things are changed, we don't have to change the forms, but it also puts the onus back on the applicant to make sure they meet the requirements and reference the Flight Ops Manual section 2.16. Once again, I certify that I have not had an authorization varied or suspended or cancelled. Something that was brought up to me today is there's no way of actually saying that if that has happened. So what we want you to do is if you have had an authorization varied, suspended or cancelled, other than at your request, just give Ops, Jill or I a call and we'll talk you through the process from there. We don't expect it to be a large cohort, but there might be people out there that may have happened to. And then once again, that the issue or upgrade has been carried out in accordance with the Ops Manual, applicant signature and date, and then the payment details down below. If we scroll down to the next page, once again, a little bit of a layout change of this. Once again, applicant name, applicant membership number, the issuer upgrade group, A, B, or D, the flight test, the aircraft it was conducted in, the rego, the duration, and then the aeronautical experience hours are just the same. Whilst we're on the subject of forms in the aeronautical experience hours, if it is an initial issue, the column on the right says total instructing RAAus instructor only hours. Just put a dash in there. Obviously, if it's an initial issue of an instructor rating, they don't have any instructing hours. So we just want to see the total hours they've got, the total in RAAus aircraft to confirm they meet the requirements of the operations manual, and then the instructing hours, you can just leave blank or put a dash in there. The examiner declaration and signature, once again, all encompassed in the same box. It should auto-fill from the top. If you tick one of the top ones, it'll auto-fill down the bottom, or you can go through and tick them as required for the things that you're issuing. Some people, if they have a CFI approval, will tick instructor rating, senior instructor rating, and CFI approval. We're more than happy for you to do that because it is the applicant is for that standard. However, if you only tick CFI approval, we also understand what that means as well. So it's up to the examiner as to how they do it. And if it auto-fills from the top, it'll probably be there anyway. Senior instructor rating, proof that they've got the PPL theory or the RAAus equivalent. Make sure if you're doing a renewal or you are upgrading to a senior instructor rating that you meet that requirement from section 2.09 of the operations manual. The three candidates, same as before, and then the certification that I certify that the applicant has been trained in accordance with the relevant legislation. The last one there is slightly different. And for those of you that have seen it, we've actually changed the checklist on page 3. So the last certification there says, as an examiner, I certify in accordance with the Flight Operations Manual and the syllabus of flight training that the applicant has completed the requirements as listed in the checklist. And this was an attempt for us to get rid of the tick boxes up above. So there's always, well, in the last iteration, there's been tick boxes down below. But now we've moved everything down to that last form. So we can move down to the checklist. I might just get Jill to talk through the ethos, and then I'll happy to break down each section. So Jill.
Okay, thanks, Jordan. So the ethos is to act as a prompt for the examiner for the process in a structural or a structured way. And for those examiners that have completed the flight examiner course, you'll understand the intent that we've delivered in that course is that you need to consider the administrative aspects, the ground-based assessment, the flight assessment, and then the post-flight debrief and administration from there. So the intent of the form that's here is to actually be conducted in the order you should be conducting the assessment. And then each of the items in each of those subgroups is subdivided for particular areas of focus or attention. So these may change in some respects as we evolve our processes, but there's always going to be those 4 key elements of the assessment. So I'll hand back over to Jordan to break those down in a bit more detail.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just a question from Dominique Esteval. Where is RAAus? It can be found on the member portal, or it can be on the instructor portal. So if you're an instructor portal, you'll see them. I'm not sure what section it's in. Section 3 or 4, I think.
I've just asked that Cody
I'll put up how to get it.
Yeah, see how quick they are. Get the instructor portal up. It's in the resources section of the instructor portal, and it is in a wrap section, so it is actually a fair way down. And of course I didn't log in before we started, so I've just got to log in. It is in section 02.1, so all 9 of the current wraps are in that section. So if you log into the instructor portal, which every instructor has and is given access to the instructor portal, you'll find all those wraps there. And as Jordan said earlier, a lot of our examiners are actually emailing that wrap to the candidate for BFR prior to the BFR being conducted. There we go. Nice. So there's the wraps in section 02.1. So wrap 1 type training through to wrap 5, what to expect from your BFR. And as I said, we've actually gone through, we've been quite busy in the last little while. We've revised all of those wraps and we're about to publish those. So we'll do a live stream in more detail on those wraps. It's a good question, Dominique. Thank you.
If we go back to the checklist after the segue, which is good, I'd just like to talk a little bit about some of the changes in the checklist, the reason why they're there. And we're actually going to produce an explanatory document in the coming weeks as to what we expect from those, and some guidance for our examiners on some of the questions or things that we're looking for with these sections. So the checklist is the same all the way through for INS 001 issuer upgrade, INS 002, which is renewal, or INS 003, which is converting instructor issuer upgrade. The checklist is the same throughout. So that'll mean there'll be things in there that if you're doing a CFI upgrade or a CFI renewal, you might not actually need to use or go through. So at the top, you can see you're referencing that all assessments conducted are in accordance with the syllabus of flight training. So Jill was talking to me about an assessment she did the other day, and it's really important to get that syllabus out and talk to the instructor, CFI pilot examiner that you're doing the renewal or initial issue for, and talk through that syllabus. What does a competency standard of 1 mean? What are we looking for? What standard is the candidate or applicant supposed to be at? So referencing in that standard 1. Yes or no tick boxes. So yes, you have done it. No, you haven't. And like I said, you're not required to do all of them, depending on what the item is. So membership and ratings are verified. Pretty straightforward. The applicant's got current membership and they've got the required ratings, just like we do in a BFR, to make sure that they've got the required ratings. If they don't, the required endorsements, you can send in endorsement recognition form END 002 for the second one there. Previously, one of the old tick boxes would confirm that they had a medical and the examiner had cited it. So the third one down, it's actually been moved from the second page into the checklist to make sure that they've got the current medical that's been cited by the examiner. And if RAAus does not have a copy, that it's actually attached to this form. The third one is a review of the logbook, the flight activity, and the revision completed. If a person is a regular instructor, then that's going to be okay. However, if they haven't done an instructor rating for a while, you might look to make sure that they've conducted some revision with an experienced instructor or an instructor trainer, and that they've been flying regularly. They meet the minimum requirements for recency for instructing in the Flight Operations Manual, section 2.08 and 2.09. If it's an initial issue, we want you to start looking at the instructor training record. So to make sure that they meet the minimum time, they meet the minimum requirements. It also gives the instructor trainer conducting the test, or the pilot examiner conducting the test, a chance to see where the candidate may have potentially lacked in some areas, and they can focus on that when they're conducting the assessment. The next one is review the, is the instructor exam completed? So for the initial issue, we want them to do the instructor exam in accordance with 3.02 of the operations manual, flight operations manual. But once again, if you're doing an upgrade or you're doing a renewal or something, you simply just tick no for that because it's not required for this. All requirements have been met. Once again, previously tick box up above. A copy of the applicant's previous instructor qualifications are attached, and that's only for INS 003, which is the converting instructor applicant. So once again, an initial issue or renewal, you'll simply tick no. And then last of all, we want you to start thinking about, is the aircraft compliant? So has the aircraft got current registration? You can look up on the instructor portal to go through that. Is the aircraft up to date in terms of maintenance? And is the aircraft actually airworthy? So there's a lot in that thread, but just get you to start thinking about that information. All right. What sort of questions? Excuse me if you can hear my son in the background. My 11-month-old son is obviously not very happy. So the ground-based assessment. One of the things that we often don't do is we don't ask the candidate what the privilege and limitations of their rating or approval are. So as an instructor, what can you do? What are the privileges that instructor rating gives you? And what are some of the limitations? You would ask things about, very important to ask about supervision requirements. So for an instructor, what supervision are you required to operate under? For a CFI, what supervision you're required to give? What does an instructor and senior have to have? What about 90-day or 12-monthly standardization and proficiency checks? So all of that will be covered in the privileges and limitations of the rating. If you're going for a pilot examiner approval, what does the pilot examiner approval allow you to do? And what are some of the things that you need to, can you go out and conduct a pilot certificate test? You can, but what do you have to do prior to that? So actually drilling down to make sure that the instructor or senior instructor or approval holder actually understands what they can and can't do in accordance with what they're being tested for. Air legislation requirements are really important as well. And especially at the moment, and we're going to talk later on about the changes to Part 91 and 103, to really go through and talk about with your applicant to make sure they understand the changes. What are some of the changes? What do they mean to me? So really just going through the requirements for the flights to confirm they understand it, to confirm they understand CAO 9555 or 9532, and then if they've got know any people operating under 9510. It's the basis of legislation that we actually operate under. So you want our instructors and even more so CFIs, deputy CFIs and pilot examiners to understand that information. So you can question them on it. Where would you find this information? And they also correctly reference CASA and RAAus references. So the ops manual, what section would you find information on endorsements? How many hours is required for a cross-country endorsement, for instance? So there's many different questions that you could ask or expect to be asked when you're going through an initial issue, upgrade or renewal. Flight planning requirements. So what do we need to think about? One of the changes, I don't want to steal Jill's thunder, but one of the changes in Part 91 is we must now obtain a weather forecast. So have they obtained a weather forecast? What is the practical application of the weather forecast against the VMC requirements once again now in Part 91? Can we actually go flying? What allows us to go flying? How much fuel do we need? What's the minimum fuel we have? So any type of flight planning requirements that you need for that flight, you want to confirm that the instructor actually understands that and can teach it to their students or other instructors. VMC, MET and radio procedures, talking about the old car 166 moving into Part 91, Part 91 420 or whatever it is. VMC, and then also some MET questions. What are some local MET questions? What about the wind gradient at this airport? What about, when do we get thunderstorms? What do you expect the weather to be in the afternoon? Things like that. We want to go a little bit further into human factors, the key operational elements. This has been put in by Neil Schaefer, our head of training, who's very passionate about this stuff, and actually start digging down into them. So what are some of the things that we think about in terms of aeronautical decision making? Crew resource management, threat area management, situational awareness. Break them down and talk about what effects are they going to have on this flight? What effects do they have with a student? What are some of the things that we can put in place to make sure that we have good decision making, that we have good crew resource management, and sort of talk to your instructor about how that's important. Why is crew resource management important? And you can lead that back to pre-flight briefings and briefings prior to make sure that we understand who is actually in control and what we're going to do for today, and that cockpit gradient that may be there, trying to make sure we know who is in control, but not making the cockpit gradient too large. Common errors. So we want to start delving into what are some of the common errors that are demonstrated by students, and what are some of the ways that we can actually resolve them. So parallax error in a turn. Talk to the instructor or the CFI or whoever's is undergoing the issue or renewal about some of the common errors that students actually do or that we see, and what are some of the ways that we can pick them up, and what are some of the methods that we can resolve them. So you can see that the assessment so far is actually leading more into some of the operational aspects, some of the things that you're going to see, rather than just a checklist of air legislation requirements. And we've purposely made a shift towards that. And it might not be in the right direction. Like we said, we're happy with where we're going, but we're happy to take feedback and actually change this as required. One of the things that we often don't talk about is assessing a student's competency for solo. What are some of the things we're looking for? What are some of the things that we're expecting the student to actually do or undertake? What are some of the weather considerations? What are some of the traffic considerations that we're going to look for? And this is particularly important for all instructor levels. It could be a senior instructor or higher who's actually sending the student solo, or it could be an instructor who will recommend to their CFI to get those 3 important candidates to then upgrade to senior. So everybody needs to know how to assess a student's competency and what we're looking for. And each CFI will have slightly different requirements for that. So it's a good time to have that discussion with your instructor candidate or senior instructor during initial issue or renewal to discuss what you're actually looking for and see whether the instructor or higher understands that and can come up with those ideas. One of the things that Cody's talking about in the background is conduct of flight reviews. You see it senior instructor and above. Once again, one of the things we don't talk about, RAAus 6 is really good on this, talking about how to conduct the flight review, or BFR. So BFR, RAAus 5 is what to expect. RAAus 6 is the instructor's conduct of that. So a bit of guidance on how to do that. But you can talk to, so if I was doing a renewal for Jill, I'd talk to her about how would you conduct a flight review? Would you send out RAAus 5? What are some of the things in RAAus 5 you'd look for? Trying to move away from this lap of the paddock, around the paddock, and just make sure they understand some of the things that are required in a flight review. Then, of course, the obligatory theory lesson. get the instructor to go through and conduct the theory lesson on the board. And then once all that's complete, you can then, on the bottom one, tick to say that you've passed the relevant theory component. So that's the ground-based assessment. And I obviously went into quite a bit of detail, and hopefully you haven't fallen asleep after hearing me talk about that. But it's just to try to provide some of the things that we think you should talk about and the context behind why we have actually done it. And one of the other things back to for the flight assessment and post-flight review, and then also back to the human factors above, is with safety months just coming up, are we talking about some of those key safety areas? So loss of control, close to the ground, installing, engine failures, things like that, the near miss, the lookout, really starting to express upon our instructor cohort from the pilot examiner level, Jill and I, and the pilot examiner level down, that these things are really important. Because I've spoken a lot, I might throw over to Jill just to talk about the flight assessment, if that's okay, and talk about some of the things that we're actually looking for in that.
No, nice work. Thanks, Jordan. And there's a nice segue there as well to have our cohort watching to have a look at the presentation that we did as an instructor training panel chat with Ken Flower and Linda Bielhartz about instructor loss of control and practical guidance and assessment tips for instructors to avoid loss of control while training, to avoid loss of control while doing BFRs, or even during flight tests. So that video is up on the RAAus YouTube channel. And as a direct result of that, there's another wrap in the process, which is a mammoth document, which we're in the process of reviewing and producing, which actually gives guidance in a written form about those same things. So it speaks to that process that Jordan's talking about. So in terms of the flight assessment, obviously this is the lap around the block component, but we want it to be a little more detailed than the lap around the block, particularly because we're talking about assessing an instructor's competency in two areas. The instructor has to be at a competency level of 1 to actually handle the aircraft with the syllabus elements. So we don't want to see inaccurate flying, busting through heights based on our flight tolerances. We don't want to see lack of coordinated flight. We want to see appropriate rudder use. We want to see very accurate flying relative to the conditions, but that instructor needs to be at a superior standard to a pilot for obvious reasons. Then we need to see how they conduct the delivery of the PATA in the cockpit while managing the aircraft to those standards. And that's one of the great challenges of being an instructor, as we all know. Not only do we have to fly the plane very accurately, but we also have to talk about what we're doing and deliver that content to the students so they understand it. Again, simulated student errors. I don't know that enough of our examiners perhaps spend time on this, and it's actually quite a challenging exercise to conduct, because if it's not done well, it can lead to a loss of control. But if the examiner plays the role of the student, and the old-fashioned term was blogs on, blogs off, not particularly politically correct, but the examiner needs to clearly articulate they are playing the role of a student right now, and they're going to do something a student would do, and they expect the instructor candidate or the PE, whoever's being assessed, to identify that issue and come up with a strategy to manage or take over if required. And that's where I'm saying the loss of control potential can occur during that exercise. So don't turn a practice into a genuine error or loss of control. So the third point in that checklist is applicant safely manages the aircraft and the training environment while delivering the PATA. Not only are they managing the aircraft, flying the aircraft, delivering the PATA, they're managing the situational awareness, they're making sure there's no conflict with other traffic, keeping an ear on the radio, making radio calls as required. So instructors have to be extremely multitasking capable. And therefore then the tick box is, have they passed the relevant flight assessment? And I guess if you want a bit more of a break, Jordan, because you were talking pretty comprehensively there, very thoroughly, which is good. The administration process beyond that point, these are actually probably in the wrong order, but it wasn't a thing we were going to particularly die in a ditch over. The logbook entry made obviously is done after the post-flight debrief is completed, because if the post-flight debrief identifies issues, then there's not going to be a logbook entry made if that candidate doesn't make the standard that's required for whatever reason. And there's a good chance to segue to a question from Stan, saying, as an instructor in training, do I have access to the instructor portal? No, Stan, you don't, because you're not an instructor yet, but your instructor trainer does. And if there's relevant documents you'd like to see, including the FIRM, Flight Instructor Reference Manual, that's available from the instructor portal through the instructor trainer, and they can provide that resource to you. But once you are approved as a trainer, once you've gone through all of these steps and you've been approved as an instructor, you're on your journey, you will have access as part of the initial issue of your rating to all of the resources there. So it's not a secret squirrel area, it's just that there are areas of member privacy that we have to safeguard for only our rating and approval holders to access the member and aircraft lookup, as an example. We also got a good comment there from Matt, the CEO. Thanks for watching, Matt. I know you've had a busy day, yeah, the ethos is, again, to make sure the forms are as easy as they can be and they only collect the data that we really need to be able to process what it is that we're doing on your behalf. So I'll hand back over, Jordan.
Great, thanks for that, Jill. Thanks for explaining that. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into the changes on the checklist. The checklist, as it says at the top of the checklist, is required to be submitted with the first 2 pages. It is page 3 of 3. And hopefully, like I said, it gives you a bit of an understanding as to the direction that we're going and some of the things that we think you should be looking at when conducting an instructor issue, upgrade or renewal. And like I said, we will be putting out some comms shortly, probably by themselves, and then eventually we'll edit them or add them into RAP 7, what to expect from your initial issue instructor rating or upgrade or renewal in there, so that the candidate understands, or the applicant understands, what information they need to understand for the assessment, and the examiner also knows the areas that they can delve into to make sure that the applicant understands or has the required knowledge. Like I said, it is a work in progress, so if there's anything you think we can add, anything you think we should take out, or any wording changes to make it clearer, please don't hesitate to let us know. We're always looking to improve this. And all this information's come from pilot examiners and Jill and I and Neil being out in the field conducting assessments and collating all this information that we think will make it easier for our cohort who are applying or conducting these assessments. Instructor INS 002, the renewal. The only thing, once again, some small changes on that in accordance with the other changes that we've made. So removal of tick boxes, examiner and applicant declarations are still the same. The only thing I wanted to say about that is there's a note above the payment box. Payment is only required for a renewal if it's conducted by an RAAus staff member. So a lot of people put their card details in with no monetary amount there because they don't know how much it is. Renewals are free. We don't charge to process renewals. The examiner may charge you, or the CFI, or whoever you're doing it with, but RAAus won't actually charge you. So for a renewal, unless it's conducted with Jill, Neil, or I, there's no requirement to put the payment details in there. An instructor form, converting instructor INS 003. Once again, slight change in formatting in accordance with RPC 002, the converting pilot, quite similar, and going down that same path of removing the tick boxes, but once again, quite similar to what we've done in INS 001 here. One of the big changes we've had that I'll get over to Neil. I see he comes on. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your input into the form review. One of the things that we have changed is MED 003, which is the instructor medical form. And what we've actually done is we've streamlined the form, and we've also removed some requirements to let us know about previous medicals you may have had from CASA or other organisations, because it is a standard that we accept. So they're equal to us. If you choose to go and get an instructor medical form, which is based on the Ausrose commercial driver's license medical, then we're happy with that. If you've got a class 2 or higher, we're also happy with that. So just some small changes on that form there, which take out the hassle of having to contact Jill or I as you use that form. We love for you to call us and talk to us, but it just removes that hassle. One of the last forms I'd like to talk about is member form 001. Now, I spoke to the team today, and we very rarely actually get people sending these in, the membership forms, because it's all done online now or over the phone. But we once again streamline these. So we've got membership forms, Mem 001 all the way up to Mem 009, which go through different things of flying membership, non-flying membership, affiliate membership, activation, reactivations, all that kind of stuff. And I'll let you go and have fun exploring them if you want to. So if we scroll down, the personal details remains the same. The applicant declaration and signature, once again, has changed quite dramatically. So if you are getting someone to go through one of these forms, it's important just to note, once again, make sure they go through every section and understand what they're actually signing for. So I hereby apply to join RAAus and abide by the Constitution. I'm not going to read through all of them, but all the sections there are important. Once again, the removal of the tick boxes will make people's lives quite a bit easier. At the bottom of that, it says nominated flight training school or CFI name. If they're coming through a CFI, you can just put your name there. That's for tracking purposes for us. But if someone else is filling out and they're unknown as to which school they're going to go through, you don't have to put anything there or unknown, and the RAAus staff will actually contact that member to discuss their options in terms of flight training schools in their area. And then down the bottom is just the payment details. So once again, probably not a form that our cohort's going to use all that much, but quite a significant change in terms of the removal of those tick boxes, which will make people using this form much easier for them. We do still recommend that people use the online application for temporary membership, flying membership. All the memberships are on there. It gives access to the member portal, and there's a whole bunch of great resources on there. So these forms are available if required, but we still recommend that people join online. There have been some small changes, like I said, to membership 002 to membership 009. The medical form 1, which is the member declaration, if I can get my words out, and medical form 002, which is the COVID declaration. Small changes on there, but nothing too drastic. The flight training school form, for those of you who are looking to create a flight training school, or FCS 002 for those of you who are looking to have a satellite created. We've actually added all the requirements down the bottom, all the steps. So quite often people will come to us and say, oh, what else is there? Everything that you're required to do will be on the bottom of those forms. There's a bit of a checklist and a bit of guidance of the documentation required to be submitted to RAAus. And the endorsement forms, small changes there, but not too many. So like I said, we'll be reviewing these forms early or mid next year, and we're collating a document already of any changes that we want to make. So if you've got any feedback on the new forms, if they don't work, if you're not happy with them, if you've got any suggestions, reach out, let us know, and we'll certainly add them into the review mid next year.
I was going to segue to that next. Good one, Cody.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. It's actually been good. We've had, I think, instructors and CFIs from every state, apart from Northern Territory, on the comments, which is great to see. So, Jack from WA, g'day, Jack. Have the online forms been updated to reflect what we've presented? We've actually, part of the process was to ensure that whatever we did on the electronic form is also replicated on the online version to make sure it is seamless. So yes, to answer your question, Jack. The other question from Mark is a bit off topic, but quite relevant. Mark's asked if the basic class 2 medical could be accepted for instructors. Absolutely. We've had that discussion with CASA for quite a while, and we will continue to have that discussion with CASA. But it's actually been overtaken a little bit by the next topic, which is a nice segue. Jordan, if you're happy for me to dive on in there. And Craig actually noted quite rightly, it's great, Craig, to see that you're paying attention, and I'm sure all of our cohort are paying attention, but on the 2nd of December, there is going to be a bit of a change to the world, and that will be in relation to excuse me, Part 91 and Part 103 in the CASR world, the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations world. So in broad terms, that means for us that while we can still do the things we do today on the 2nd of December, the references will be different. And this is a really important thing for our instructor cohort to be across, because we're going to be relying on you during the RPC flight test or a BFR or an instructor renewal or an instructor initial issue to actually ask the question, do you understand how the Part 91 103 changes affect our world? And at the moment, what's going to happen is the CAOs that we currently operate under, CAO 9555, 9532, 9510, are actually going to be edited to reflect the Part 91 world. So we'll be working in a bit of a dual world for a little while we work with CASA on the 103 MOS, the Manual of Standards. So it's a little confusing, and we are going to be putting out a lot of guidance material. In fact, one of the things we're going to be producing and getting our instructor cohort to use and become quite religious about it is a questioning document at the time of initial issue or renewal for RPCs, BFRs, instructor ratings and renewals, which will actually ask the question about, do you understand the Part 91 103 world, and where would you look for resources? So this is a great segue for us to have a look at the sorts of resources we've got on our website. Let's see how quick Marette and Cody are in the background. We've created a page that is from that direct link. The MTO is coming, but also from the latest news and information. Thanks, whoever's driving that. That's the one. Wiggle the mouse. So it actually says new regulations, Part 91 103. Might need to blow that up for us poor old blind buggers. It gives an overview of what the changes in broad terms talk about, but there's also some really important links. So those links take you to the CASA website, because this is the place to go. Let's not confuse the issue by having different information in different places. There's the plain English guide. If you haven't already read that, as Matt would say, do yourself a favour, go and read that, because it explains in plain English what the rules are, and it also gives you the reference from the 91 world. There's also, so it's a cool photo too. There's also another great reference there called the mapping document. That should be as a link there as well. See how quick the mice are running there. This is a godsend, can I just say. There are two documents, and thanks to CASA for producing these. This is the mapping document from the current CARs to the new Part 91. And as you scroll down, you'll find that will turn into a landscape format, and you'll see the specific references. There it is. I can't read that, but as an example, the previous CAR 239 weather requirement is now CASR 91.230. So what that table represents is, on the left is the previous or existing CAR reference. CAR 166 is a perfect example of the operations in and around the vicinity of airports, and the new reference from that, which is 91.420 through to 520, I think. Haven't quite memorised all of those yet, but the references are there. If you haven't already found that document, that is an absolute godsend, and that should be available in your schools for everyone to reference. So mapping of regulations to Part 91. There's also a version of that mapping the civil aviation orders to Part 91, but that does not include our orders, our Civil Aviation 95 series, unfortunately. So in broad terms, the thing that we need to know as instructors, and the thing that RAAus is expecting of our instructors, is for them to be informed. If they're not informed, how can we expect them to inform our pilot cohort, either an initial issue or at renewal? So in broad terms, the requirement, as Jordan said a bit earlier, to obtain weather is a new requirement. There's a hemispherical change we've been talking about every time we mention 91. And as part of the process, we've also been beavering away in the background on exam rewrites. Now, we haven't done an exam review for probably about 5 years, which is probably a reflection of the fact that the legislative landscape's been fairly stable for a while. So the intent on the 2nd of December is to issue everyone new air legislation exams. So I guess the question would probably be, how do I manage that as a CFI if I've got a flight test for RPC on the 2nd of December? So at that point, you would assume that all of the exams we currently have been completed by the candidate to a satisfactory standard. So this oral questionnaire that we're going to be providing will be your means for confirming that that candidate understands the legislation has moved into the Part 91-103 world. So that document will be provided to you on the 2nd of December. The reason it's being provided so late is because we haven't had the capacity or ability to understand the changes that are being brought in and make the changes to the documents. It's been quite a hectic couple of months for us, and this week particularly has been rather hectic, but we are working very hard to give you as much guidance material as we possibly can. So the exam rewrite will be in stages for that very reason. Air legislation is the primary exam, and what you could choose to do if you wanted is have the candidate sit the air legislation exam again on the 2nd of December if you believe it's necessary, because it will include the questions that relate to 103 and 91, or you can do the oral quiz, and I would suggest that you then make a note that you've completed that oral quiz and put that in the student file to confirm the regulatory obligations. As part of the exam rewrite process beyond that point in 2022, which is not that far away, we will be releasing all new exams. And again, Neil is working feverishly in the background to upgrade and revise all our exams, as are Jordan and I. So we are trying to give you as much supporting documentation as possible, but we really do rely on you as the cohort to be informed and to be aware of your the changes so you can educate your candidates. There's a note here saying that we are exempt from some of 91. Yeah, life is a little confusing at the moment. So 91 is the general operating rules. Some of those things are not applicable to RAAus. They talk about IFR requirements and planning requirements for foreign aircraft, etc. And there's also some components of 91 which are exempted to under 103, and 103 being the suite of legislation that applies particularly to sport aviation bodies like RAAus. So in 91, there are some things that will say this is not applicable if a 103 aircraft is being used. RAAus aircraft will become 103 aircraft on 2nd of December. So just follow that bouncing ball a little bit. We talk about following the regulatory bouncing ball. Sometimes it kind of bounces around the screen and confuses the heck out of us. But the guidance material that's on that website, in broad terms from CASA, for mapping of documentation, the plain English guide, and most critically, the visual flight rules guide. Let's see how quickly Cody and Moret can bring that up. That is an amazing document. It's the plain English version of all the rules, and on the 2nd of December, it will also be changing because it has to reflect the new 91-103 world. There it is. Nope. Close. So we're looking for the visual flight rules guide, which should be on that link on that same page for the 91-103 documentation on our website. So if you go to the RAAus website, you'll find the page that talks about 91-103. On that page, there will be a link to the visual flight rules guide. We'll just keep chatting here for a little bit to give Cody and Moret time to find that. The CAO 95 series has got some changes. One of the most important ones, as we talked about with the live stream with Jared and Matt last week, I think it was only last week, the max takeoff weight increase is approved in terms of legislation, but we don't have the ability to register or operate heavier aircraft yet. We will be telling you all about that in due course. But right now, the most important news is that the 760 kilos is approved, and it is a part of our process then to work with CASA on how RAAus can manage those category of aircraft. So just got a bit of a conversation going in the background there, and we've got a link. There we go. Visual Flight Rules Guide. So there's an online version. You can probably buy a version of it from the online store as well, but it's probably better to keep that electronic because it will be being kept up to date. If you have got an old printed version, please throw it away because it's not going to be relevant from the 2nd of December. So did we mention on the 2nd of December there's going to be a pretty massive regulatory change? Because if CFIs and instructors aren't across that, you need to be. Jordan, what have I forgotten?
I think you've pretty much covered it all. That's really good. I guess the thing is, as Jill said, we're working extremely hard with the information that we've got currently to provide as much guidance to our instructors and all our members as we possibly can. And as more information comes to light, we will be providing more and more guidance on how this legislation affects us and what we expect you to know and what we expect you to test of your students coming through. It is, our CEO Matt was saying the other day, it's uncharted waters, it's unprecedented changes at the moment. It's been the biggest changes in 40 years or more. And it's going to take a while for all of us to adjust and find out where things are. Our membership is not very used to looking at manual of standards. So we've got Part 91, and then that'll give the legislation, and then the meat and potatoes will be in the manual of standards. So you have to reference 2 documents. So it is going to be quite different. Just keep reading through it. We'll help you out where we can. And if you've got any questions, then that's a good one that's come up there. Yeah, if you've got any questions on any of this stuff, any of the forms or any of the changes to Part 91, 103, or when the new CAO comes out, feel free to send us an email to members or ops, or give Jill or I a call, and we can help you out. The last thing I just wanted to mention in terms of the forms is we will be accepting old forms until the until the end of December as a bit of a grace period. We suggest, as we mentioned last year, that you go on to the website and download the forms as you are using them, but we know people like to print them. So we will be accepting, we'd rather you didn't, we'd rather you use the new forms and take advantage of the old, of the new changes, but we will be accepting them until the end of the year if that's required. So hopefully you found this session informative. We've just gone a little bit over time in a couple of important topics. And like I said, if we can be of any assistance throughout the changes to Part 91, 103 and the new CAO, or any of the forms or anything, feel free to contact us, and we hope you've found this informative. So thanks for watching.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jill,
Have a great day. Stay safe and dry.